is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Folks, this is the Screen Watching Podcast. My name, Dan Barrett. Joined, as always, my dancing monkey, it's Simon Foster.
Dan Barrett, good morning to you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're listening to this week's Screen Watching. Very happy to be with you this week. A lot of heavy Aussie content. We've got a lot of Australian-made shows and movies to talk about this week, and it's always good supporting the local industry. That's what we're here for. What we're going to say about the local industry, I'm not too sure, but I'm sure it's going to be positive.
Yeah, I think your definition of support and mine is probably quite different. But look, we're going to talk about that. But if folks don't know this podcast, this is, it's some guys standing around and we're talking about the movies and the TV shows and whatnot. Yeah.
We want to help you choose what to watch, what not to watch, be kind of a guide. We're a film and TV Yoda to your Luke.
Yeah, so look, if we want to really embrace that idea of what to watch and what not to watch, let's start with what not to watch. We're going to discuss the Australian version of The Office.
Big announcement. Can I have a drum roll, please? The drum roll, Lloyd.
That's how I drum roll.
People ask me, how can I become a great boss? And the answer is having a happy staff that love you.
This is a proper HR nightmare.
Simon Foster, a couple of weeks ago, there was the release of the trailer for The Office. Now, there's a thing that happens when you come across remakes. So with any TV show or movie, people have a certain belief that things go the way that they should go. Like, this is how that character should be. And so as soon as they see a different take on it, the comparisons are obvious and, well, the comparisons get drawn. Okay, and quite often fans will be like, oh, I don't like this because it's not the thing that I'm used to.
Sure.
And so that's kind of that perilous terrain that one enters when it comes into a remake, which, yes, you're getting attention on your product because people are familiar with what it is that you have to offer. But at the same time as well, people come in with their own preconceptions. When The Office premiered in the US back in, 2003? I want to say off the top of my head. There was the obvious comparisons to the UK original, which everyone was really quite in love with. And when the American one launched, people were like, ugh, I don't care for this. This isn't the UK one. And admittedly, the US one stumbled a little bit, had a couple of structural issues, and a few approaches to character, which didn't really necessarily quite work for the show. But probably the biggest problem I had is that for, I think, the first 1 to 2 episodes, actually, I think it's just the first episode, was based just a refilming of the first episode of the UK version. And so that idea of comparison just becomes all the more intensified. Now, obviously, we know what happened with The Office. They found their own voice, and pretty quickly it started actually generating a fandom behind it. 200-odd episodes later, it's one of TV's biggest success stories. Some, and I would certainly be part of that, would say that it actually surpassed the UK one in a number of different ways.
Agreed.
But, I certainly appreciate the fondness that people have for that UK original. So, cut to a few years later, here we are in Australia with what is the 16th adaptation of The Office.
Good Lord.
What is important to consider as you think about the fact that there's been 16 adaptations? Almost all of those adaptations have been failures. Okay? Of all of them, there are only 4 versions of the show that ever went past 2 seasons.
Wow.
Okay, and even those that went past 2 seasons, they never really passed about 45 episodes. It's a pretty limited success that they've had with adapting this to various territories. So, cut to a few weeks ago, they released the trailer for the Australian one, and understandably, people looked at it going, oh, this looks terrible.
Yes.
I looked at it and I had 2 thoughts. 1, it looked terrible. But 2, knowing what they did with the US, which was that they were kind of really mimicking what was happening in the UK version at the time, okay, and then they found their own voice after about a season. I looked at this thinking, look, the first episode of this may be terrible, which, having seen it, it is. The first episode may be terrible, but by the time that you reach the series finale, maybe they'll actually sort of corrected a few of the issues with the program and it may be fine.
Sure.
Okay, but also, this is the 16th adaptation, which means that they've got 15 prior versions of the show to talk to various sort of showrunners from, talk to creatives, try to find out what it was that worked for their various versions of the show and what didn't. Having watched this, it's clear those conversations never happened, because the mistakes they make are the really obvious, just blunderheaded things that people can fall into, the traps that exist with The Office as a format, and they just fall into all these traps. And so you sit here as a viewer watching the show where you've got a loud, obnoxious boss who the premise, the thing that holds the first season together is this series-long arc about, obviously it's 2024, a lot of workplaces now employ a lot of work from home and a bit of a hybrid model. They're finding at this company, which is called, what is it? It's like Finley Craddock. Then they're like a packaging company. Mm-hmm. What they find is that most of the staff are happy working from home. So the episode opens with the main character played by Felicity Ward. Her name's Hannah Howard. She's the managing director of the branch. She's told that they want to shut down the branch in favor of moving all the staff to working from home. Anyway, her life is apparently managing this branch, and so if she can't do that, like obviously she has a self-esteem issue which is really going to come into play, and she just can't handle the idea that everyone will be working from home. She doesn't have the joy of the office, and so she ends up telling the representative from head office, hey look, if we can hit the annual sales target in just the next, I think, 6 weeks or whatever she says, which ends up being like $220,000. I don't think I'm getting my time frames right or dollar figures, but it's, if we can hit the sales target, can we keep the office open? And reluctantly, the person from head office says, yeah, sure. So Hannah Howard, in typical sort of Michael Scott and I've suddenly forgotten Ricky Gervais' character from the UK version. David Brent.
Brent, yes.
Yeah, so in typical David Brent or Michael Scott fashion, she ends up going to the office workers and says, hey, look, head office is saying it's mandatory to come back to the office, but I've been told that if we're able to hit the sales target, we can do a hybrid thing. So she lies to them.
The bait and switch.
The bait and switch. So what you've got is this character in the form of Hannah Howard, who's just an annoying, frustrating person. But she also ends up deceiving her entire, work staff. Okay, so as a viewer, you're already offside with her. You see the way that she's treated her staff and lied to them about something which I think a lot of viewers probably find to be fundamentally important about their current sort of work-life balance as well at the moment. Mm-hmm. So you've pissed off the audience, and they never do anything to redeem her. So the thing with the US office is that, and this is famous, like the writers of this talk about the course correction they made on the show, which is for the first season of that show, which is only a 6 or 8 episode season. Michael Scott is the Hannah Howard. He's really brash and annoying and really frustrating. But what they realized by the end of the first season, and very much course corrected with the first episode back of season 2, The Dundies, is that they need to make Michael Scott, one, he actually needs to be good at his job. Because if he's good at his job, it means that the other cast characters, like, they may find him frustrating, but they see that he has value, and like they're willing to embrace like a certain amount of the stupidity he brings to the office because he actually kind of knows his shit at the same time. Exactly. Okay, which is a really good learning when you're talking about this kind of a dynamic. But then as well, you actually need to give him like a sense of emotional interiority so that you kind of get the sense that if somebody is mean to him or something, like it actually impacts them. He's not just a caricature. But they don't learn that with Hannah Howard. She's just a caricature. And I've only watched the first and last episodes of this season because I want to see if they course corrected, but they don't. She's just a caricature and does nothing to necessarily bring the audience on side. And as a result, it becomes a really frustrating watch. And the bigger crime of it really is that a lot of it's not very funny and you can't really buy into the emotional heart of the show either because the characters just don't really have an emotional heart. They're just very broad, very surface level characters. It's a frustrating watch because there is potential with The Office. Working in offices, like nation by nation, we all have different cultural experiences when it comes to the workplace. There's ways to do a unique version of the Australian office, which isn't the same as the American, which isn't the same as the UK, which isn't the same as Stromberg out of Germany or the Office PL out of Poland or any of the other many adaptations of it. You can do your own version. You can be something funny and interesting and relevant to that local market, but they did not land it.
So let me bring a different perspective this from someone who fleetingly watched the Ricky Gervais version, quite likes the Steve Carell version, but didn't watch it religiously. So The Office to me feels very 20 years ago. And I know that it's had a long life in streaming and that it's found a huge audience on the streaming platforms. But to me, if this was going to happen, it was going to happen with some sort of artistic integrity or some sort of local spin that is relevant, this would have happened a decade ago.
So look, I
this very
agree with you, but for a different reason. And I think the reason why... Yep.
I was going to say so to me, this feels very much like safe IP exploitation, and everything you say about this, it being an uninspired and not particularly focused and kind of missed opportunity sort of program, points to that as well. So I've got more interest in watching the Polish version of The Office from a decade ago than I have in watching the Australian version of The Office right now.
Look, I mean, I think the Polish version is actually only about 10 years ago, but, here's the thing. The idea of The Office as IP regurgitation... Okay, sorry, there's probably two things. One, I think that Amazon Prime Video in Australia has been quite good at the media release TV program. The actual show they release is less important than the media release they send out saying that they are doing whatever the show is, because then that actually gets some attention and makes Prime Video seem like a place where people should be subscribing to.
They did Rafters, didn't they? They did the Rafters rehash.
They did. So they did Back to the Rafters, and then they also do this format in a lot of countries around the world, which is called Last One Laughing. And what they do is get a group of comedians into the same room, and they all try to make each other laugh, and anyone who laughs gets sent out.
Yep.
Okay, which is kind of an interesting idea, but it's always terrible in execution. Like country by country, the show's always bad. Mm-hmm. But it means that they can send out a media release saying, hey, we're doing this program with all of your favorite local comedians. And so it's cheap to make. They get the media release out there and they just keep on rinsing and repeating. It makes sense. I totally get why they do it, but it's not rewarding. And then there's been a number of other shows they've done locally, which kind of feel like press release TV programs. Okay. But the point that I probably want to get to is going with that idea, this feels like it's a dated idea. Yes, I get why you're saying that. I think there's still a valid, I think you can still make it The Office Australia and make it feel current and valid and justify the reason it exists. But the challenge they have is actually what they identify in this as a plot point, which is that the workspace has changed dramatically. 20 odd years ago, when the UK version and then the American version were airing, going to work every day, 9 to 5, okay, Monday through Friday, that was the experience. These days, there is that sort of greater emphasis on a work-life balance. Post-COVID, you're finding that idea of people working 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, and variations of that. I'm someone who works in an office, worked from an office, but I now work from home 5 days a week, which has its own challenges and unique things. So my work experience is quite separated to the idea of having to go into an office 5 days a week. And the very premise of this program is based around that idea of the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So just the way the world has shifted around the premise of this program makes it a bit difficult and speaks to what you're saying, which is that it kind of feels a bit outdated, and it does because of that.
Yep. All right, so The Office has... So where is it at with its programming? Are they okay to season 2 yet, or are they still waiting to see how this one goes? Or what's the vibe at Amazon right now with it?
Here's the thing. So with this, the question is always what is publicly known and what's contractually in place. You do find with a lot of TV programs now, they'll announce a season 2, and it doesn't actually matter how season 1 performs. Like season 2 is just contractually mandated, as they've done a 16 episode order as opposed to an 8 episode order, and they've just split it across 2 seasons. So sometimes that's the case. I mean, we don't know exactly what the deal is with this. I would presume if we're looking at it on face value, they're going to renew this thing season by season. And what they'll always be looking at is across that first month, what are the completion rates? How many new people does it bring to the service, et cetera, et cetera. I would be very surprised if the completion rates are in any way impressive on this. I think there'll be a lot of people that are tuning out through that first episode, let alone watching episode 2. Like the drift is going to be massive on this.
Okay, The Office is on Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video. Check it out at your peril if you listen to Dan Barrett. And who doesn't listen to Dan Barrett? I'm off to the movies. I'm going to go and see Adam Elliott's new film, Memoir of a Snail.
Dad used to say that childhood was like being drunk. Everyone remembers what you did, except you.
Ha! Good one, Dad.
But I remember everything. Right from the start.
Adam Elliott's a bit of a national treasure. He won an Oscar for Harvey Crumpet all those years ago. He is a stop-motion maestro who's short films and features to date, Mary and Max, Ernie Biscuit, and his new one, Memoir of a Snail, capture a very melancholy, bittersweet view of the world. He's famous for putting his characters through the ringer in terms of emotional and often physical torment, but having them emerge the other side happier and better clay characters than they were at the start of the film. In his latest one, we meet Grace Poodle, who is beautifully voiced by Sarah Snook from Succession. I have huge respect for voice actors who aren't stunt casting, and there's a bit of stunt casting in this one, but Sarah Snook absolutely embodies the spirit of Grace. She is a very average person living in first Melbourne and then Canberra, where she goes to a foster family while her brother is sent off to Perth, where he's housed with a very conservative evangelical family. And I'll get to that aspect of the story very soon. She is trying to connect with the world but can't. She hoards snails, not only the living, loving kind, but also any other kind of snail, and her world becomes a symbolic sort of testament to the being withdrawn and hiding within oneself to keep yourself away from at arm's length from the rest of the world. She goes through life hoping to experience the love she had briefly when her family, the father and her brother, were together, but instead barely makes connections along the way and finds generally that she is untrusting of a world that is only ever terrible to her. The brother, who discovers his homosexuality, finds himself being tormented by this family of conservative Christians, and sets about undoing their world while also fleeing and making his way back to find Grace. So this is an animated film, and it all sounds pretty heavy and disturbing. And Adam Elliott does heavy and disturbing with a whimsical touch very well. There's no denying that he is an expert craftsman and a very impassioned storyteller with a really sort of unusual perspective on the world. The only thing that I would say about Memoir of a Snail is that it's starting to feel a little bit familiar for Adam Elliott. These sort of outsider characters that exist in their own universe and exist at odds with the world around them have been his bread and butter now for all his career, going right back to his VCA, Victorian College of the Arts, short films that looked at, one was called Uncle, Cousin, and I think Brother off the top of my head, but they looked at the interdynamics of family life, then on to Harvey Crumpet, then on to Mary and Max, and Ernie Biscuit. There's a flow of character traits there that feel a little bit maxed out with Memoir of a Snail. He in an interview I did with him recently, which is available in our YouTube page, he spoke about putting his characters through this horrible life cycle only to emerge at the other end. And there's meant to be a sense of elation, a sense of joy that comes with the characters discovering that as well. That's kind of missing a little bit here. We go through a lot of hardship with these characters, and you kind of get the sense that things are going to end up okay. So you're missing some of the harsher elements of their existence in the way the narrative unfolds. So while there's no denying he tells a beautiful story and he tells it well, there's also a sense that Adam Elliott maybe needs to take the next step and try something a bit new, a bit different. The pluses here are that we get to see Elliott's hometown of Melbourne from a claymation perspective. Things like the St Kilda Boardwalk and the Arts Centre are rendered in beautiful claymation artistry. And you get to hear not only Snook's voice work, but also Cody Smith-McPhee and Eric Banner and a whole lot of great actors bringing really quality voice acting to the cast. So, yes, terrific film. Elliott's a master. He is a national treasure, but maybe with his next couple of films, we can find him pushing off in a different direction or exploring different aspects of melancholy and despair and hope with characters that just aren't feeling a little bit too familiar to him. But having said that, no denying that fans of Adam Elliott will love what he does with Memoir of a Snail, which is in quite a lot of cinemas for now. It's a testament to how much he has established himself as a real auteur and a beloved auteur here in Australia by just how wide they've gone with this as a release. So it's called Memoir of a Snail and in cinemas now. I am going to jump very quickly into another small Australian film which is getting a limited cinema release. It's called He Ain't Heavy.
Focus on your breath.
How's everything going?
Soften your eyes. Look around.
Gotta get that door fixed. Can't keep fixing things. Mum, I know that this looks crazy,
Just take a moment for yourself to pause.
but I feel like this might work.
This is a film that I was fortunate enough to have seen about a year ago. It may have been reworked since then, but it tells the story, all set in the Perth suburbs, of a family who is trying to get the son off his addiction to drugs and out of a life of crime. So what they do, and he's played wonderfully by Sam Collette, what the older sister does, who's played by Layla George, by the way, who has since gone on to play a young Kate Blanchett in Disclaimer, is lock him in a room in a house, a decrepit old house on the furthest point of the Perth suburbs, and let him go cold turkey. Layla George is joined by her real-life mother, Greta Scacchi, on screen as the mother of the young man. And together they work through not only his terrible addiction problems and the criminal element that are trying to trace him down, but also a whole lot of family secrets and machinations along the way that reveal what a terrible family life they have had recently, but also what a beautiful family life they had previously. So it's this independent drama featuring three terrific performances in a way that, with a sort of working class vibe and working class understanding that Australian cinema, when it does well, it does really well. And the filmmakers do a really great job with He Ain't Heavy. When I saw that Layla George was in Disclaimer, I recalled that she had a part in this, and I was thrilled to see it drop into only a handful of cinemas. This will really find its audience on the streaming channels. But she is great in this part, as is Sam Collette as the drug addict. And there's some big, heavy moments as he deals with his addictions, as those sort of horrific physiological changes can, as far as opportunities for actors can have. And it's a movie that, like I say, probably won't find too much of an audience in cinemas, which is a shame, but hopefully will, as maybe some of the awards season kudos comes its way, which I hope it does. So it's called He Ain't Heavy, in select cinemas now and coming to a streaming platform near you pretty soon, I'd gather.
Fantastic. Now, Simon, let's just quickly wrap through other stuff we've been watching lately. I just want to give a heads up. Elsbeth has returned for the second season. The first season was... it's not quite The Good Wife or Good Fight or anything like that, but it's perfectly fun enough. It's enjoyable TV. It's back for a second season, enjoying that. Shrinking, which is a pretty reliable hangout comedy, is now on Apple TV Plus for its second season.
Giving that a big push. They're the stars. Siegel's turning up everywhere for that, and it's on bus sides. They've got high hopes for that.
Yeah, and look, I think absolutely worthy of the promotional push for it. I think this is a show which audiences should embrace, probably not quite to, Ted Lasso levels if we want to have an Apple TV Plus comparison point. But even so, I think this is a show that should have a pretty reliable, solid audience. It's fun. I think it takes a few episodes to find its groove in that first season, but once it does, I think you tend to love the characters, and for a sitcom, often that's kind of all you want. And something which I haven't had the chance to watch yet, but is very high on I desperately want to see this sometime today, is new Disney Plus series from the UK called Rivals. Stories about the media in TV shows and movies are always much more popular with critics and people who work in the industry than it is with viewers. But this is one which looks at UK media and is fairly salacious in its depiction. Pretty curious about giving it a look.
What else have I been watching? I'm glad you asked. A very mixed bag this week. I watched a documentary on the streaming service DocPlay called Occupied City. Now, director Steve McQueen, who did 12 Years a Slave all those years ago, he takes as a starting point various sites around the city of Amsterdam and only films them in their modern setting. So he'll literally point a camera at the corner of Zeligstrasse and whatever. But in keeping the camera focused on this point of the city, he will then recall why it is significant for the years between 1940 and 1945 when Nazis occupied Amsterdam. So, and I should also point out that this is a 4-hour and 15-minute documentary that I watched on a grey, rainy Saturday morning last week here in Sydney. It is a spellbinding work, the likes of which you've never seen. Your reaction to these, what are essentially sort of still snapshots of a city now. There's no historical footage. They don't show any war footage at all. He literally just plants the camera and with a voiceover, he will recount why this part of Amsterdam has such a rich and tragic history for both the city itself and the Jewish people. It is an extraordinary work, and you find yourself completely captivated, not only by the visuals, but also by the stories as they unfold. And sometimes you find yourself more interested in what's happening on screen in the modern setting than you do by the accounts of what the Nazis put the people of Amsterdam through back all those years ago. And that's kind of the point of this. We're not realizing what the history of this. The other thing that I realized that this is just Amsterdam. This happened in cities all over Europe during the Nazi occupation of World War II. So extraordinary documentary, one of the most incredible things I've seen. Then I watched the first episode of Hysteria on Binge. This is the new Bruce Campbell, Julie Bowen horror/teen story. The pitch for this is very much, hey, everyone, we've got the next Stranger Things. And it kind of lives up to that with the first episode. It's all set in the satanic panic period of the 1980s when heavy metal music and dark comic works were sort of seen to be synonymous with this rise in Satanism. And there may or may not be a very dark spirit invading this small American suburb where the quarterback goes missing and a murder mystery unfolds that may have supernatural elements to it. The first episode was a lot of fun, great effects work, and a beautiful looking sort of freaks and geeks meet Stranger Things sort of vibe. So it's called Hysteria. The other one I watched just quickly is My Old Ass. Now, this is zimmed through cinemas a couple of weeks ago, barely hung around. I found it at Govinda's. Now, Govinda's is a vegetarian restaurant and screening room in Darlinghurst. It's been around for a long, long time. I used to hang out there a lot when I was a bit of an inner city nerd. I haven't been there in years. I wanted to see My Old Ass, which is the Aubrey Plaza film, which kind of has the Tom Hanks big movie spin to it, in that a young girl played by Maisie Stella, I think her name is. She's terrific in this. Meets an older version of her played by Aubrey Plaza, who gives her some hints about how to deal with this section of her life. It is such a wonderful film, and Govinda's is such a beautiful setting to watch it in. You just lay back on the mattresses provided and soak up this very cool movie going and, as it turns out, movie watching experience. So big recommendations for my What Else Have You Been Watching?
Indeed, and Govinda's exists in a number of capital cities around Australia, Simon.
Yes,
it's just the chain. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Anyway, folks, let's get out of here. Simon, if people want to track you down on the internet, how do they do this?
You can go to my screen-space.net page where I do a bit of writing. I previewed the Asia Pacific Screen Awards and had a look at the upcoming Capital Film Festival in Canberra on the website this week. What do you do when you're not doing this?
Bit of this, bit of that.
Bit of this.
Yeah, a little bit. Look, beyond just walking the earth generally, people can find me at alwaysbewatching.com. It's a newsletter that comes out each and every goddamn day with all the streaming news and information you want about TV and a bit of movie stuff and all sorts of things. If it's on a screen,
It's been a
I
hearty
talk
read
about
this
it.
week. You had a very long form bit of journalism in a few of those. It was a terrific read this week.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty hefty week with a lot of pretty big news.
Yeah, that's very true. Screen Watching at Screen Watching Podcast on Facebook, at Screen Watching on YouTube. As I said, my interview with Adam Elliott and my interview with John Bell, the director of the new Australian film The Moo Guy, both went up this week. So check those out. Email us screenwatchingpodcast@gmail.com.
Simon, I forgot the big thing that sells my newsletter now. Every Monday, the New Look newsletter has the Coolometer, which is literally me ranking what's cool and what's not in the world these days. Of
Well,
TV
if
film.
anyone knows what's cool, it's you, Dan Barrett. Let's face it.
Exactly. Yeah. The aforementioned shrinking, discussed here in the podcast, was the hottest thing in the Coolometer this week, with Kathy Bates a pretty strong second.
Wow. Kids loving it.
Yeah.
Kathy Bates.
Lower down, a show which we should probably dedicate an entire program to this is the new Binge UK series called Send Nudes Body SOS.
Wow.
And Simon, if you haven't checked this out yet, you need to do yourself a favor.
Okay, well, with a title like that, I'm surprised it hasn't popped up in my feed. The algorithms aren't working like they used to. But yes, I will be checking that out.
Okay, there's a number of jokes there, but I'm going to leave them alone. Folks, we'll see you next week.